Welcome everyone to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter and I am the curator, actually the Sims curator for digital humanities in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. Once a week, I do Coffee with a Codex. I pull a book off the shelf, sometimes more than one, and we look at them on Zoom for 30 minutes. It's very informal. If you have questions or things to say, well, as I go along, put them in the chat. I will be watching the chat. My colleague, Amy Hutchins, who is our cataloging librarian, manuscript cataloging librarian, will be on the lookout too, so she may answer your questions. Today is a little special and a little different. So usually I do this by myself. Today I have visitors. The star visitor here, as far as I'm concerned, is Andrew. Say hi.
Hello.
So Andrew is my son. He is 15 years old. He's a ninth grader at Reach Cyber Academy, which is a
Virtual school.
Virtual school, yes. And so he is usually at home. So he gets out of the house today because it's Penn's Take Our Children to Work Day. So that's what this is about. This is not totally random. We're doing a bunch of other things today. But given that Coffee with a Codex is such an important part of my work, I wanted him to come and see this. And it's also a chance for him to see some manuscripts on a topic that he is interested in, and that is astronomy. So I got 3 of our earliest Latin astronomy manuscripts. They're some of my favorites, so we're going to look at them. And to help us with that, we have Michael Zellmann-Rohrer, who is our visiting Sims fellow. And he's an expert in these in this topic. And so he's going to hopefully help us understand some of what's happening in the books. You can say hello.
I'll do my best. Hello, everyone.
And also my colleague Lynn Ransom is here. And Lynn is our curator of programs. And she just popped in and said, can I sit in? And I said, yes. I was also expecting another couple of people, but they're not here. So we'll see if they show up. Anyway, that's enough intro. So let's start looking at some books. So the first one that we're looking at is LJS 384. This book, the binding, as often, the binding is not an old binding. The binding is a much newer binding, but the manuscript itself was written in Germany circa 1150. So this is a 12th century manuscript. And astronomy is only a small part of what's happening here. The text that has the astronomical section in it is called De Philosophia Mundi, and it's by William of Conches. Conches, I think, is how his name is pronounced. Conches. Conches.
Yeah.
Okay. So he died circa 1154, and if this was written around 1150, it could be. Hello, come on in. Hi. So here's my colleague Brian and his kids. So come on in, have a seat. We just got started. So what we're looking at, so this is a mid-12th century manuscript. It's from about 1150, so it's pretty old. And I was just saying the first text here is De Philosophia Mundi by this William of Conches, and it was written circa 1225. So if you think about this, that was written in 1225. The manuscript was written in 1125. The manuscript was written in 1150, and he didn't die until 1154. So this manuscript was very likely written during his lifetime, which is pretty neat. A lot of times we have manuscripts that are only copied many, many years after the people who actually wrote the text died, right? Because texts are copied and copied and copied. So the text has 4 books. On God and Creation is the first book. The second book is Stars and Planets. So that's the astronomical part of it. And then there's Weather Phenomena, and then there's Earth and Man. And when we get to the section on Earth and Man, we'll look at it briefly because there's something sort of interesting happening there. So, okay, so there we go.
There's our zodiac.
There's our zodiac looking in from the top. And then when we turn a couple of pages, here are the ones that I think are particularly fun. And these are also diagrams that you tend to see over and over again. So if we get a chance we're going to look at the other ones, and these will look familiar. So these two, they're a little messy. I kind of like them. This is I believe this is a lunar eclipse. So you have the sun, Sol, and then you have, this one is labeled as Terra, so that's the Earth. And then there's Luna. So the sun, the Earth is between the sun and the moon, and it's blocking the light, so you get an eclipse. And then this one is a solar eclipse because you have, no, that's just actually the same thing because you still have Luna, Terra, and the Sol there. And what you would expect is at some point there is a solar eclipse, which just flips the moon and the Earth. But I'm not actually seeing them.
I have a small question.
You do.
Do you think this could be moon phases?
That
That's what it looks like.
is moon phases.
Exactly.
Yes.
I see.
Yeah, that's exactly what moon phases are. And you can see there's the
They've got
sun.
Greek names, if I remember well.
It is, so they're not written.
The phases, I mean.
Yes. It's not written in Greek, but it could be
But
Latin.
they're
Yeah.
their loan words.
I don't want to freak the camera out, so I'm trying not to.
No sudden moves.
No sudden moves.
Yes, curators is one of them.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got that. Excellent. So this is actually the little piece. I mentioned that this is a text that has a lot of other stuff in it, and this is the astronomy part. The only other thing that I wanted to, well, there's a few others. So here, in addition to looking at the stars, we're also talking about the Earth. So this is a map of the hemispheres, right? So here's Europe, is here, and then that sort of the rest of the world is empty, which is
Bad news for us in Australia.
Bad news for Australia. That's right, Michael. So Michael is visiting us from Australia. So they could go on a t-shirt. They could. They're very cool little things. And then here's another one that's just empty. And the I didn't mention this, but this is representing water. So that's why it sort of looks like that as water. So this is how medieval people sort of represented their world. You have a lot of things like, they knew that they knew the world was round. They knew it was a sphere. And this is sort of how they conceived of that. So this is what I want to show you. So this is the section, I mentioned that there's a section on man and God. And this is the section on man, which apparently is about procreation. And so somebody came through and decided that they did not like that. And so they took their pen and marked it all out, the kind of, yeah. So there's that. So that's this little one. So that's fun. And now let's move on because we actually do have two more manuscripts I'd like to look at. So the next one is 26. Can you hand me 26? 26, not two. Yes, 26. You're right. There's 26 and 216. And they have the same texts in them. And so they confuse me. So this is 26, LJS 26. This is another early one, not quite as early. So this was made in Italy between 1220 and 1275. So both this one and the one that we're looking at are sort of mid-13th century copies of a text by a man called Johannes de Sacrobosco, who wrote multiple really well-known and popular science texts. And he was active around 1230. So he wrote the text that we're going to be talking about was written around, I think they said 1232. And then he died there were two different dates that were given for his death. It was either 1244 or 1256. So sometimes around there. And as I said, this one was written between 1225 and 1275. So as with the one that we just looked at, this could have been written during his lifetime, which is pretty neat. All right, so here we have this one. So this is a little bit messier than the other one. So the text that we start with here, I'm going to take advantage of the Zoom here, it actually starts with the text called Algorithmus, which was another very popular text that Sacrobosco wrote. And this is about math. And it's a practical text about math, about adding and subtracting, multiplying, dividing, all of the basic math things. Because we're talking about astronomy, we're not so interested in this one. So we're going to pass through. I will point out delightful hole in the parchment that was probably caused during the time, somehow during the time the parchment was made, although it looks like it could have been ripped out, but it was clearly done before the text was written, and it's been drawn around with red ink, and then the text is written around it. So that's sort of how they dealt with holes in parchment. The second text that's in here is the one that we want to talk about, which is called Tractatum de Sphaerae, or sphaera, and it's about the spheres. And when you're talking about the celestial spheres in the Middle Ages, this was how they thought of the way that the solar system worked. So Andrew, what is like the central tenet of medieval astronomy in terms of how the solar system worked?
That Earth was in the center.
Yes, that Earth was in the center. So is Earth in the center of the solar system? No is the right answer. So no, the sun is in the center of the solar system. We all know this. Everything goes around the sun. But in the Middle Ages, and they got this idea, they didn't make this up, they got this idea from the Greeks. They believed that the Earth is in the center of the solar system. And what happens when the Earth is in the center of the solar system is that everything rotates around the Earth, which causes something interesting that I'll mention in a second. But here is a diagram that you see a lot, again, of how the solar system looks. So you have Terra in the middle, which I think actually isn't labeled here. These are actually labeled as sphaera. So these are the spheres. So you have Terra in the middle. And then here I'm just seeing here is Solus. So the sun has a sphere. Jovis, which would be Jupiter. And the firmament. So the firmament, which is sort of, I think, is that where the stars are? Is that?
Yeah, the fixed stars.
The fixed stars
are there.
Yeah, so they knew that there were fixed stars that didn't move. And they knew that there was obviously the sun and the moon that are very large and like this. And then there were the planets, and they knew that the planets were there because they moved in this strange way.
Which gives them their name in Greek originally. They're the wandering stars.
Oh, the wandering stars. Is that where
Planetes in Greek is.
I never knew that. Planete. That's cool. And so if it's not this one, there's another one. So medieval astronomers had to account for the movement of the planets and how they moved, and that they would go back and forth, basically. But my understanding of the way that the spheres worked is that the spheres themselves moved. I'm looking at Michael.
Yes, that's the Aristotelian understanding, is that there are these concentric spheres, and there you have what is here at the very outer one, the primum mobile, the prime mover, is the real mover, and it transfers its motion metaphysically to the rest of the spheres. But you need extra spheres to account for this retrogradation, all of the anomaly of planetary motion that one observes, that's easily explained by a heliocentric solar system.
Right.
But you need to preserve the phenomena, you need all of this special pleading.
Right. And I'm wondering.
I thought there was maybe it's in the next one, actually. There's
definitely one in the other one. I'm wondering if this is, or if this is something else. I think maybe I can't tell if that's it.
That's east and west.
Oh, okay.
Again.
Okay, east and west again. And I think that's all the diagrams. The diagram that's in this one that's really impressive is that one that we just saw.
And it looks like someone's added their orbital periods as well. That's the later hand.
Is that what
you see on the right?
What this is?
Different ink is how many years it takes them to complete an orbital period.
Okay. And so that's here. And this is nice because it does show that people were using this book So his texts, Sacrobosco's texts were used particularly for as textbooks. And in fact, this one, there is an annotation on 9 verso, which we're looking at here, that this was used by a Florentine physics student, Pietro di Santo Giovanni in 1399. And that's, I think that's what this is.
There it is.
So we see 1399 here. So this is a student who was using this in almost 1400. So this would, and it was written in 1225. This is a good 150, 75 years after the book was written. So it was still being used as a textbook after that, which is pretty neat. And Laura is pointing out that someone glossed in the math and the little rectangles on the right. So I guess that's
What does gloss to mean?
a gloss is sort of generally it's kind of any kind of text that's in addition to, so it could be notes. Sometimes it means particularly like a gloss would be a translation. Like that's how I first learned about it, was like a translation gloss, but it can be any kind of commentary, usually in the margin or sometimes yeah. So so it could be like written between the lines, and sometimes you also have glossed manuscripts, and we've looked at them before that were actually planned as glossed manuscripts. So instead of just like here, somebody just came along later and put them in the margin, but you might have a main text that's sort of in the center, and then planned glosses written all around it by the same scribe. Yeah, so there's a lot of notes in this one. Oh, and here's some interlinear. Here's some linear glosses too. That might be fixing. Yeah, it looks like somebody came through and is fixing what they think are errors. All right, so we have a couple minutes. So I'll put this one up and we'll get the third one, which is LJS 216. All right, 216. This one is fun because it's in a later binding that is a little velvet, so it's a little bit pretty. It's kind of worn now. I used to have a pair of Doc Martens that were velvet, and they ended up looking like this at some point. So this one is also written around the same time as the other one. I think the date we have here is between 1256 and 1270, so maybe a little bit later. This is written in Paris, France, and this one is a little bit more decorated than the previous one. I didn't point it out. That one also had a little bit of color. So if you've been here before, you know I talk a lot about the blue and the red. Here is a little illuminated initial that has seen better days, but I believe this is it's a teacher in front of a class, and he's got some kind of it's like a planet on a stick. So this is like, we are doing astronomy today, and that's what we're doing. So there we go. And this one has some nice annotations and also some diagrams. So here are some little marginal glosses. And let's see if we can find those diagrams so we can see them real quick before we have to run away. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So here's the one I think we were talking about. Is this the one with the retrograde?
That one certainly has retrograde. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So this is, I don't know if maybe that's supposed to be the sun. And then here are some planets that are.
Yeah, these must be the inner planets then. So either Mercury or
Venus. Yeah. And so Mercury and Venus are closer to Earth than the sun, according to this. And here the Earth is then in the center. So this is how those planets look from where we are, is they're going around in their own kind of little circles.
Epicycles, they call them.
Epicycles, right. Cool. And then here is that same diagram that we looked at in the earlier manuscript. This is this is going to be what is going on here?
Lunar eclipse.
Yes, it's a lunar eclipse, right? Because the Earth is between the sun and the moon. And then I think over here is a solar eclipse. So the moon is blocking out the sun, and it's showing only on a portion of the Earth. So if you're in another part of the Earth, you're not going to be inside that eclipse, which of course we know that is how solar eclipses work. And there are, I thought there were more.
Did one of them have a diagram for a quadrant or something like that at the back? Maybe that was one you've already.
It might have been one of the other ones.
Yeah.
This one it's got this pretty little flower. Let's see. I don't know, that might be, there's another, oh, this one we've got the serpent eating its tail.
Ouroboros.
Ouroboros, yes. There, along with the pretty little thing. There was more, but it might have been the other, yeah, it might have been the other one. But we are actually out of time. Oh, here we go. So here is, this is going to be the temporal, the zones of the Earth, maybe. So this is the idea that the Earth, you have the equator where it's hot, and then it gets colder as you go to the thing, but usually you see that on both sides. So I'm not actually sure. It's not labeled and it's just sort of pretty colors, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening there. But I'm sure the person who wrote it,
It's an artistic decision.
An artistic decision, yeah. So we really are out of time. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but I'm glad we were able to at least see most of them. So thank you, Andrew, for sitting with me while I talked about manuscripts. Thank you, Michael,
Pleasure.
for adding your knowledge. And thank you guys for coming and sitting in. And thank you, everyone, for coming on Zoom. We'll be back next week. And I hope you all have a great week. And I'll see you later. Bye. Oh, thanks.